It began as what appeared to be a routine stolen vehicle investigation. On an early Sunday afternoon, November 3rd, officers in Moses Lake, Washington, were patrolling the downtown area when they spotted a truck matching the description of a vehicle reported stolen just hours earlier. At first, there was nothing particularly unusual about the call. Stolen vehicles were common enough, and officers were trained to approach these situations carefully. But this response was different. Multiple police units had been dispatched. More officers than would normally be needed for a simple vehicle theft report were now converging on the scene. Looking back, it almost seemed as though no one could explain why the situation felt so tense from the very beginning. What the officers could not possibly have known was that this traffic stop was about to become the first step in a much darker investigation. An investigation involving a respected young athlete, a confused and disoriented man, a family hiding a terrifying secret, and a discovery that would eventually lead investigators towards some of the darkest and most disturbing body camera footage ever seen in the case. Inside the truck sat 27-year-old Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah was not just an ordinary suspect. He had once been a promising athlete, known for his talent on the football field. He had played as a standout wide receiver and had gone on to compete at the college level for Eastern Oregon University. To many people who knew him growing up, Isaiah had been someone with a bright future, but the man officers encountered that afternoon was almost unrecognizable. As they approached the gray Chevy Silverado, officers immediately noticed details that caused concern. There was ammunition visible on the passenger seat. That changed everything. If ammunition was sitting openly inside the vehicle, there was a possibility that Isaiah could also be carrying a firearm. Suddenly, what had started as a stolen vehicle investigation had the potential to turn into an armed confrontation. The officers knew they had to act quickly and carefully. They ordered Isaiah out of the truck. As he stepped out, they began questioning him and searching for possible weapons. "Do you have a knife?" an officer asked. Isaiah responded by pointing out a pocket knife. "This one? That's it? Okay." The interaction seemed calm on the surface, but something about Isaiah's behavior immediately stood out. He appeared distracted, disoriented. His speech and responses did not seem normal. At one point, Isaiah asked if he could sit down. "Can I take a seat?" he asked. "Okay. It's ridiculous how bad I need one, you know?" "I hear you." But then, something unexpected happened. One of the officers looked at Isaiah more carefully, and suddenly he recognized him. "You knew him?" "Yeah," the officer replied. "So I went to high school with him." Isaiah Thomas and Officer Alvarado had attended high school together. Alvarado remembered him clearly. He was a star athlete, right? He was. But as Officer Alvarado stood there looking at his former schoolmate, he could immediately tell that something was wrong. Isaiah began talking, but his behavior was strange. He started talking, and it was kind of weird. For Officer Alvarado, this was not the Isaiah he remembered. The young man in front of him had once been a talented football player with a promising future. Now he was sitting in the middle of a police investigation, appearing confused and struggling to focus on basic questions. The contrast was impossible to ignore, and there was a reason for it. A reason Officer Alvarado had not yet discovered. Within minutes, Isaiah and his entire family would become connected to a far more serious investigation, one that involved murder. For the moment, however, officers were still focused on the truck. They needed to find out whether the vehicle was actually stolen. Isaiah claimed that it belonged to him and his family, but someone had reported that he had taken the truck from another person. The situation was confusing, so officers decided to contact Isaiah's mother. They obtained her phone number and called 47-year-old Cassie Thomas. When the phone rang, Officer Alvarado introduced himself. "Hello? Hello, this is Officer Alvarado with the Moses Lake Police Department. I'm trying to reach Cassie." "This is she." "Hey, do you have a son, Isaiah?" "Yes, I do." Officer Alvarado explained the situation. "We had a call earlier about him being in someone else's vehicle. He's in a truck now, a gray Chevy Silverado." "Okay, we're trying to figure out if this is his truck or not, because he's saying it is. But the person that called about him said that he stole the truck from another neighbor." Cassie's answer immediately changed the direction of the conversation. "No, that's his and his grandfather's." Officer Alvarado paused. Okay, who's his grandpa, if you don't mind me asking? Richard. Richard? Yeah, he probably let him borrow it. He's staying with his grandfather right now. Officer Alvarado asked for the address. What's the address? 430 Dale. That answer immediately caught his attention. Yep, the officer replied. That's where the truck was taken. Suddenly, the situation started to make more sense. Or at least that's what the officers believed at the time. Okay, that's weird, Cassie said. Yeah, no, that clarifies something, because we thought potentially this truck might have been stolen, so we were trying to figure it out. No, I'm sorry about that. No, no worries. At this point, Officer Alvarado began to believe that they had made a mistake. Maybe Isaiah had not stolen anything at all. The truck belonged to his grandfather. He was apparently living at the same address from which the truck had been reported missing. That explained why Isaiah had immediately wanted a lawyer. From his perspective, he was being accused of stealing a vehicle that belonged to his own family. But despite the confusion surrounding the stolen truck report, Officer Alvarado still could not shake one feeling. Something was wrong with Isaiah. The officer had known him before. This was not the person he remembered from high school. So while he still had Cassie on the phone, Alvarado decided to ask her directly. I went to high school with Isaiah, he told her. He was never really like this. Is everything okay? It should be, Cassie replied. He should be fine. Okay. He just seemed a little bit off to me when he was talking. Cassie quickly offered an explanation. Well, probably because he's being accused of something he didn't do. It's his grandpa's truck. Yeah, he lives at 430 Dale. Officer Alvarado thanked her for answering his questions and ended the call. But the conversation left behind an uncomfortable question. If Isaiah was not acting strangely because he had stolen the truck, then why was he acting that way? Why did a once promising athlete seem so disconnected from reality? Why was there ammunition inside the vehicle? And perhaps most importantly, what exactly was happening at 430 Dale? At this stage, no one on the scene could have imagined what investigators were about to uncover. The stolen truck report was only the beginning. The vehicle itself was not the real mystery. The real mystery was Isaiah, his behavior, his family, and the events that had taken place before police ever spotted him driving through Moses Lake. As officers continued to piece together the situation, the investigation would begin moving in a far more disturbing direction. What initially appeared to be a misunderstanding involving a family vehicle was slowly transforming into something much darker. A possible crime had already taken place, and the people closest to Isaiah might know far more than they were willing to say. The strange behavior Officer Alvarado noticed was not something he could simply dismiss. His instinct told him that the former football star he once knew was not acting like himself, and soon investigators would discover why. The call to Isaiah's mother had solved one mystery. The truck was not really stolen, but in doing so, it opened the door to an even bigger question. If Isaiah had not stolen the truck, what was he running from? And what was waiting for police at the home where his grandfather was supposed to be? What officers were about to discover would turn a routine traffic stop into the beginning of a terrifying murder investigation? And once investigators finally entered the world surrounding Isaiah Thomas and his family, the truth they uncovered would be far darker than anyone could have imagined. Because this was never really about a stolen truck. The stolen truck was only the first warning, the first crack in a much larger and more disturbing story. And what happened next would reveal why Isaiah was confused, why his behavior had changed so dramatically, and how a young man once remembered as a talented athlete became the center of an investigation that would leave an entire community searching for answers. As the pieces of the story began to come together, one horrifying question remained. What had happened before Isaiah got behind the wheel of that truck? And when police finally found the answer, and my questions. It actually helps out a lot. Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Bye. As Officer Alvarado ends the call with Isaiah's mother, Cassie, he still has no idea just how close he is to uncovering the truth. His suspicion that something is seriously wrong with Isaiah isn't far from the truth, but suspicion alone isn't enough. At this point, Officers have no evidence connecting Isaiah to any crime. The supposed stolen vehicle has been explained, and his mother has confirmed that the gray Chevy Silverado belongs to Isaiah's grandfather. Reluctantly, the officers have no choice but to let him go. Isaiah is free to leave, but Officer Alvarado can't simply forget what he has seen. This isn't the Isaiah he remembers. The former star athlete he knew in high school is now standing in front of him, confused, distracted, and behaving in a way that deeply concerns his old friend. As Isaiah prepares to leave, Alvarado makes one last attempt to reach him. Not as a police officer, but as someone who once knew him. "Let's walk over to the front of your truck," Alvarado says. "I know you don't want to talk about this, but it's cool. You don't have to." Isaiah listens quietly. Then Officer Alvarado offers him something far more important than another police question, a chance to talk. "Do you want to talk about anything?" he asks. "Because I'll turn off my camera." Isaiah still doesn't open up, so Alvarado continues. "There's a time in everybody's life where they just need to really reevaluate what's going on, you know?" Isaiah agrees. "Yeah. If you need anything," Alvarado tells him, "please don't hesitate to call. I'll sit down and have a conversation with you." "Sure. All right. Take care." And with that, the encounter comes to an end. But to Officer Alvarado, it feels like Isaiah had wanted to say something important, something he was struggling to get out. It was as if the words were there, trapped somewhere inside him, but he simply couldn't bring himself to say them. For now, Isaiah gets into the truck and drives away. He has no idea that before the day is over, he will once again find himself at the center of a police investigation. But this time, it won't involve a supposedly stolen vehicle. This time, someone is missing. A short time later, a call comes into the Moses Lake Police Department. "Can I help you?" Yeah, a woman says nervously. "I was wondering if I could speak to somebody about a missing person. It's my father. Nobody's seen him." The dispatcher immediately begins gathering information. "Is this in Moses Lake?" "Yes, Moses Lake." "Okay. And his first and last name?" "Richard Andrews." The name is entered into the report. Richard Andrews is 75 years old, and according to his family, no one knows where he is. The dispatcher asks for his home address. "Is it 430 Dale?" "Correct." The same address. The same house connected to Isaiah. The same house officers had just discussed during the earlier investigation involving the truck. At this point, nobody yet realizes how significant that connection will become. "All right, Kelly," the dispatcher says, "I've got this report started. I'm going to hand it over to the officers." The woman on the phone is identified as Kelly Kirkendall, Richard's daughter. The dispatcher asks her to find a recent photograph of her father and instructs her to call back immediately if she hears from him or if anything changes. Then the report is passed on to patrol officers. Within minutes, police are heading toward 430 Dale. A missing person investigation has officially begun. When officers arrive, they find several members of Richard's family gathered at the home. "Hello." "Well, I'm doing better than you guys," one person jokes. "How's it going?" "How are you?" The officer introduces himself and begins speaking with the family. Waiting at the home are Carmen, Kelly, and Cassie, Richard's daughters. Sergeant Rodriguez is now responsible for finding out what happened to the missing 75-year-old man. At first, the family begins explaining the situation. "We have no idea," one of them says. A neighbor had reportedly spoken to Kelly's husband. "This is my husband, Mike." "Hi, Mike." According to the family, Richard hadn't been seen in more than a day and a half. "I haven't seen him longer than that," one family member explains. "But his phone's been ringing. His sister's called. Nobody knows where he's at." Sergeant Rodriguez asked the obvious question. "Is this normal?" No. For some members of the family, Richard's disappearance is clearly alarming, but then something unexpected happens. A familiar face appears. Isaiah. The same Isaiah who had been stopped by police earlier that afternoon. The same Isaiah Officer Alvarado had known since high school. The same Isaiah who had seemed so strange and disoriented only hours earlier. and now he is standing at the home of the missing man. Sergeant Rodriguez immediately turns his attention toward him. Do you know where your grandfather is? Yeah, it's my grandpa. Richard's grandson claims he knows nothing about his disappearance. Rodriguez continues questioning him. He didn't tell you anything about where he was going? Did you see him leave? No. Isaiah then begins describing the last thing he remembers seeing. So basically what I did see was him talking to somebody out here. He points toward the area outside. He was kind of parked a little farther out. Like, he pulled off to the side a little bit. They were talking in the window. The explanation is vague. Isaiah says Richard had mentioned going up to a property on the reservation. He did tell me that he was going up to the reservation, Isaiah says, but police have already checked. Richard isn't there. Sergeant Rodriguez asked which reservation. Colville. Colville. Yeah. The family says Richard has property there, but they had already contacted people at the property. Nobody's there. Nobody's there. No. Richard had apparently told people he was going there, but he never arrived. That makes his disappearance even more concerning. The officer then tries to establish a timeline. What time was it when you saw him last? Isaiah struggles to remember. I don't remember. Was it morning, afternoon, nighttime? It was afternoon. Afternoon. It was like late afternoon. With each answer, police begin narrowing down Richard's last known movements. But there is one major problem. The family doesn't appear to agree on how serious his disappearance really is. While some family members are visibly concerned, Isaiah seems surprisingly relaxed. Police have just arrived to investigate the disappearance of his 75-year-old grandfather, and Isaiah is casually smoking marijuana. That doesn't necessarily mean he is guilty of anything, but to investigators, the contrast is noticeable. And it becomes even more noticeable as Sergeant Rodriguez asks Isaiah about the last time he saw Richard. Isaiah, you said you saw him about a day and a half ago? Yes. And that would have been yesterday afternoon sometime or the day before? Yesterday? No, not yesterday. Isaiah appears confused. Was that a day? A day and a half ago? Police help clarify the timeline. Friday, today's Sunday. Friday? So, November 1st. The officer asked what Isaiah was doing when he last saw his grandfather. I was sitting right there smoking. And where was he? Right there, talking to that guy. Isaiah points toward the area outside the house. And then I looked down. Boom. And then that was that. It is another strange and vague explanation. Rodriguez asked him whether he found it unusual that Richard had suddenly disappeared. Was it weird for you that he wasn't here or anything like that? No. That answer immediately stands out. No? He'd be gone for weeks. Isaiah explains that his grandfather owns property and sometimes disappears for extended periods. He'd be gone for weeks at a time. His mother, Cassie, supports that explanation. No one would be here. But another family member sees things very differently. Kelly is worried, genuinely worried. To her, this isn't normal, and one detail makes the entire situation much more suspicious. Richard's wallet is still inside the house. Isaiah even admits that this is the one thing that bothers him. The only thing that's weird is that he left his wallet here. Sergeant Rodriguez immediately focuses on that statement. Okay, that's very strange to me, because while someone might voluntarily leave home for days or even weeks, leaving behind a wallet can be a serious warning sign, especially for a 75-year-old man. Isaiah and Cassie continue insisting that Richard's absence isn't necessarily unusual. He'd be gone for weeks at a time, they explain. But Sergeant Rodriguez notices an important contradiction. Yes, Richard may have traveled before, but according to the family, they usually knew where he was. We know where he's at usually, someone explains. Usually Richard could be found at one of his properties. Usually someone could call him. Usually there was some explanation. This time there isn't, and that is what makes the case different. While Kelly appears deeply concerned about her father, Isaiah and Cassie appear far less alarmed. Isaiah becomes increasingly defensive when police continue asking questions. Then, another person arrives, Isaiah's father, Anthony, and with him comes the first major breakthrough in the investigation. Anthony tells officers that there may be something strange at Richard's shop. What were you talking about up there? Someone asks. Something has caught Anthony's attention. It looks like some burnt stuff that's laid out there. The officer asks where the shop is located. The shop's down in the valley. You know where the motorcycle shop is? Anthony explains that Richard often spends time there. If he's not here, he's usually down there. Sergeant Rodriguez asks the obvious question. Do you think something else is going on down there? No, 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 no. Anthony quickly backs away from the suggestion, but then he repeats what he saw. I'm just saying that if he's not here, he's down there. Then he adds something that immediately catches the officer's attention. There was some burnt-up stuff out there that's never been there. Burnt-up material. At the missing man's property. Something that apparently wasn't there before. Suddenly, the search for Richard takes a much darker turn. Isaiah doesn't seem happy about the direction of the investigation. Bro, why y'all keep all in? His frustration grows. Y'all pissing me off. The officers remain calm. Hey, you're pissing me off too, one responds. Everybody's pressing me like I... No, it's okay, the officer interrupts. You're the closest thing to him. And that's the problem. Isaiah is believed to be one of the last people to see Richard alive. Naturally, investigators need answers. But every question seems to make Isaiah more defensive. He insists that he has already told police everything he knows. I told you. No need to get frustrated, an officer tells him. But the questions continue. Would Isaiah be able to help them locate the shop? Would you be able to take one of my officers down there to where the shop is at? Yeah. The officer explains why. Just so that way we know exactly what we're talking about. And so that way, if he's there, that's great. Right. At this point, police are still hoping for the best. Maybe Richard is simply at the shop. Maybe there is an innocent explanation for everything. Maybe the burned material Anthony noticed is unrelated. But as the officers prepare to head to the property, they continue gathering information for the missing person report. Do you remember what he was wearing, Isaiah? I do not recall. The officer explains that they need the information to enter Richard's description into the system, because that's part of the report that I'm taking, so I can enter it into the system. Okay, I know. The conversation becomes tense again, but the officers remain focused. Any jewelry? Jewelry? No. Someone from the family says Richard's belongings are inside the house. Then Anthony offers to guide officers to the property. Because they don't have the exact address, one officer will follow him to the shop in Cascade Valley. And as the police prepare to leave, nobody knows what they are about to find. The missing person investigation is no longer just about locating a 75-year-old man who failed to return home. There are now disturbing clues. A wallet left behind. A grandfather who supposedly traveled often, but had never been completely untraceable. A grandson who was one of the last people to see him. A family giving noticeably different reactions to the disappearance. And now, reports of something burned at Richard's property. Just hours earlier, Officer Alvarado had looked at Isaiah and felt that something was wrong. He had been right, but neither he nor Sergeant Rodriguez yet understood how serious the situation was. The officers were about to follow the trail to Richard's shop, and what began as a search for a missing grandfather was slowly turning into something far more sinister. Something had happened at that property. The only question now was whether Richard Andrews was still alive. And as officers moved closer to the truth, the strange behavior of Isaiah and the divided reactions of his family would begin to make far more sense. Because the closer police got to the shop, the closer they got to uncovering a horrifying secret, and the investigation was only just beginning. While Isaiah and his mother, Cassie, insist that Richard's disappearance isn't especially unusual, another member of the family sees the situation very differently. Richard's daughter, Kelly, is genuinely concerned. To her, this isn't just another one of her father's trips. Richard may have been known to disappear for days at a time, but this time, something feels wrong. His phone has been ringing without an answer, his family has no idea where he is, and perhaps most disturbingly, many of his personal belongings are still sitting inside the house. Then the investigation takes an unexpected turn. Isaiah's father, Anthony, arrives at the property, and almost immediately he gives police the first potentially important lead in the case. What were you talking about up there? Someone asks. Anthony begins explaining. Yeah, see, you need to go down to a shop. Take some pictures down there. The officers listen closely. To me, it looks like there's something going on down there. What do you mean? Anthony describes something he noticed at the property. It looks like some burn-up stuff that's laid out there. That immediately gets the attention of the officers. Where's the shop? The shop's down in the valley. Anthony explains that it is near the motorcycle shop and that Richard often spends time there. If he's not here, he's usually down there. At first, the officers are simply hoping that the missing 75-year-old man may be at the property. Oh, I got you. But Anthony's comments about the burned material are difficult to ignore. Do you think something else is going on down there? An officer asks. No, 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 Anthony quickly responds. But he continues explaining what he saw. No. What I'm saying is that there was something out there. It looked like there was some burned-up stuff out there that's never been there. Something unusual. Something burned. Something that apparently had not been there before. For a missing person investigation, that is enough to make police take a closer look. As officers discuss going to the property, Isaiah suddenly becomes increasingly frustrated. Bro, why y'all keep all in? Then he raises his voice. Y'all pissing me off. The officers don't back down. Hey, you're pissing me off too. Isaiah complains that everyone is pressuring him. Everybody's pressing me like But the officer cuts in. No, it's okay. You're the closest thing to him. That statement is important. Isaiah is one of the last known people to have seen Richard. So from the officer's perspective, questioning him isn't personal. They simply need answers. Isaiah insists that he has already explained everything. Okay, and I told you. No need to get frustrated, an officer tells him. But the tension is clearly growing. The officer then makes a simple request. Would you be able to take one of my officers down there to where the shop is at? Yeah, just so that way we know exactly what we're talking about. And so that way, if he's there, that's great. Right. At this point, everyone is still hoping that Richard will simply be found at the shop, but police must also prepare for the possibility that something much worse has happened. Sergeant Rodriguez continues gathering information for the missing person report. Do you remember what he was wearing, Isaiah? Isaiah pauses. I do not recall. The officer explains why the question matters. Because that's part of the report that I'm taking so I can enter it into the system. Okay, I know. I'm just letting you know. Police continue asking about Richard's appearance. Any jewelry? Remember any jewelry? Jewelry? No. Someone interrupts. I'm sorry. Let me talk to him. Thank you. The conversation continues as officers try to gather every possible detail. Then another important discovery is mentioned. Because Richard's family has been searching through the house, they already know what he left behind. His cell phone's here. Wallet's here. Everything's here. Even his dog is still at the house. Dog's here. The officer clarifies that they need to know what Richard might have had with him. Just whatever he had on his person, in his pocket. Okay. The growing list of belongings left behind makes Richard's disappearance increasingly difficult to explain. His wallet, his phone, his personal belongings, his dog. If Richard had voluntarily decided to leave for an extended period, why would he leave behind so much? And if he had planned to travel to his property, why had no one there seen him? These are questions police cannot yet answer. Okay, all right, thank you. With the information gathered so far, the investigation splits into two parts. Anthony and several other family members prepare to head toward Richard's shop with a deputy. Meanwhile, Sergeant Rodriguez remains at the house. He still needs to gather the remaining details and establish an accurate timeline of Richard's disappearance. But as he listens to the family and reviews everything that has been said, something else begins to stand out: the tension between Anthony and Isaiah. Anthony appears unusually frustrated with his son, and the way he questions Isaiah doesn't sound like an ordinary family disagreement. It almost sounds as though Anthony suspects that Isaiah knows more than he is saying. Throughout the investigation, Anthony repeatedly pushes for answers. He seems focused on Isaiah's movements, on what Isaiah saw, and on when he last saw Richard. From the outside, it appears that there may be something the two men understand that the rest of the family does not. At the same time, Isaiah becomes increasingly defensive. Every question seems to irritate him. Every attempt to establish a timeline makes him more frustrated, and he continues insisting that everyone is overreacting. To Isaiah, Richard's disappearance isn't necessarily a reason to panic. His grandfather had disappeared for long periods before. But to Kelly, the situation is completely different. And to the police, the evidence is beginning to paint an increasingly troubling picture. A 75-year-old man is missing. His phone and wallet are still at home. His dog has been left behind. He never arrived at the property where he was supposedly going. One of the last people to see him is his own grandson, who is acting increasingly defensive. And now there is a report of strange, burned material at the missing man's shop. The officers don't yet know what happened to Richard. They don't know whether the burned material is connected to his disappearance. And they don't know why Anthony appears to be so frustrated with Isaiah. But they are about to investigate the shop. And that decision will push the case into a much darker direction, because the answers they are looking for may not be at the house. They may be waiting for them in Cascade Valley, and whatever Anthony saw down there. It was enough to make the police take a closer look. The search for Richard Andrews is no longer just a routine missing person investigation. Something is beginning to feel very wrong. And as the deputy follows Anthony and the family toward the shop, investigators are about to discover whether Richard is simply missing or whether something far more terrifying has happened. His mother, Cassie, reacts very differently. While the rest of the family appears confused about Richard's disappearance, Cassie remains strangely calm. She smiles at times and even answers questions that weren't directed at her. Sergeant Rodriguez notices the unusual contrast in the family's behavior and prepares to leave for Richard's shop, hoping it might provide some answers. But before he can go, Cassie suddenly says something that immediately catches his attention. "Get out of your car and come get my kid. Put him in cuffs right now." The statement is shocking. Just moments earlier, Cassie had shown little obvious concern about Richard's disappearance. Now, without officers finding Richard, without a body, and without any evidence connecting Isaiah to a crime, she is suddenly demanding that police arrest her own son. Rodriguez is clearly confused. Another family member quickly warns her not to say anything, reminding her that they don't actually know what happened yet. But Cassie's sudden urgency has already raised a serious question. Why is she so convinced that Isaiah is responsible for something before investigators have even discovered a crime? As Cassie approaches the sergeant, her accusations become even more alarming. She insists that something is wrong and appears desperate for officers to take Isaiah into custody. At this point, Rodriguez doesn't fully understand what Cassie is implying, but in just a few minutes, her words will take on a much darker meaning. Meanwhile, Anthony is already heading toward Richard's shop, located only about 2 miles from the family's home. A patrol unit follows closely behind him. The hope is that Richard may have gone there. Perhaps he's simply been working and failed to tell anyone. Perhaps the family's growing concern is unnecessary. But the moment the first deputy arrives at the property, that possibility quickly begins to disappear. Several family members are already gathered outside Richard's shop, and before the deputy can properly assess the situation, something unusual catches their attention. There appears to be a tarp nearby. The ground looks disturbed. The family begins looking around the front yard, trying to understand what they're seeing. Then someone notices an area that appears as though a vehicle may have backed up close to the building. The deputy immediately becomes concerned. Back up, please." But the family members continue moving around the area, desperately trying to see what's there. The deputy repeatedly orders them to step away. "Back up, please. I want to see. I want to make sure." Everyone is anxious. Everyone wants answers. Then suddenly the situation changes completely. A family member notices something beneath the ground. The deputy begins trying to clear people away from the area. "Ma'am, can you come this way, please?" But emotions are already spiraling out of control. Then comes the horrifying discovery. "Sarge, he's buried in the ground." For a moment, there is disbelief. What? The answer is almost impossible to process. There's someone buried underneath the ground. What investigators feared has now become a horrifying reality. Buried in a shallow grave in the front yard of his own shop is the body of 75-year-old Richard Andrews. The missing person investigation is over. This is now a homicide investigation. Richard's daughter, Kim, is among the first to see the body. She immediately recognizes her father. Part of his leg has become visible, and she recognizes the jeans he is wearing. the same style of jeans Richard was known to wear. For the family, the discovery is devastating. For the deputy, the situation is becoming increasingly difficult to control. Family members are crying, shouting, and moving around the scene. The deputy tries desperately to push everyone back, but the damage may already have been done. This is supposed to be a protected crime scene. Instead, several people have already gathered around the shallow grave. And according to the deputy's observations, some family members had even started digging before law enforcement fully secured the area. But something else immediately stands out. Rather than simply grieving Richard's death, certain members of the family begin accusing someone. And they all seem to be focused on the same person, Isaiah. One family member becomes especially emotional. "I knew this was going to happen," she then makes a direct accusation. She tells officers that Isaiah did it. Not only that, but she claims a rifle may be lying on a bed at the family's house. According to her, the weapon could be connected to Richard's death. She also mentions Isaiah's mental health, calling him a psychopath and urging officers to go after him immediately. But there is a major problem. At this stage, police have no direct evidence linking Isaiah to Richard's death. They haven't established how Richard died. They haven't recovered a murder weapon. They haven't even finished examining the body or the grave. Yet members of the family are already absolutely convinced that Isaiah is responsible. The deputy tries to calm everyone down. He explains that additional officers and supervisors are responding and asks the family to cooperate. But emotions are too high. Some family members refuse to leave the area. "We're not leaving." Others continue demanding that police go after Isaiah immediately. "Is somebody over there getting that little psychopath?" The deputy attempts to reason with them. If they truly want justice for Richard, he explains, they need to allow investigators to do their jobs properly. But Kim is certain she already knows who killed her father. "I already know who did it." The deputy responds carefully. Knowing or believing who is responsible isn't enough. Investigators need evidence. They need to understand what happened. They need to preserve the crime scene. And most importantly, they need to make sure they don't accuse the wrong person. Within minutes, Sergeant Rodriguez finally arrives at the shop. He steps straight into chaos. Family members are everywhere. Richard's body has just been discovered. The crime scene hasn't yet been fully secured, and everyone seems to have a different version of what they believe happened. Rodriguez immediately begins ordering people away from the area. "Ma'am, let's get away, please." He explains that officers need to preserve the scene. "We need to make sure that we do this, okay?" But the family's overwhelmed with grief. One woman refuses help. Another apologizes. Several people continue crying and trying to stay close to the grave. Rodriguez repeatedly asks everyone to move back. "We need everybody back, please." Then he explains why. "We need to preserve this." One family member interrupts him again, insisting she already knows who is responsible. "I already know who did it." Rodriguez tries to keep his patience. He knows the family is grieving, but he also knows that a homicide investigation cannot be built on accusations alone. "Listen to me, please. I know you know. We need other things to make this work." And he's right. The investigation has only just begun. Isaiah may be guilty, but at this point, police simply don't know. As officers begin examining the area more carefully, another disturbing discovery is made. Scattered across the grass is burnt debris. It appears that someone intentionally destroyed something. What exactly was burned is still unclear, but investigators immediately recognize the importance of the evidence. Then they notice something even more suspicious. The area of grass where Richard's body was buried doesn't appear natural. The lawn seems to have been cut out. A section of grass appears to have been removed and replaced. Even more strangely, the area appears to have been watered afterward. It looks like someone went to significant lengths to hide what was underneath. This was not a simple burial. Whoever did this appears to have deliberately tried to make the yard look completely untouched. The question is, when did this happen and who did it? Investigators still don't know whether Richard was murdered at the shop or whether his body was brought there afterward. The shallow grave could be the original crime scene, or it could be part of an elaborate attempt to hide the body. To find out, officers need to search the building, standing only a few feet away. Richard's shop. They approach carefully. "Sheriff's office, make yourself known. Come out with your hands up." The officers don't know whether anyone could still be inside. If the killer was recently at the scene, there is a possibility that person may still be nearby. Police, anybody in here? There is no response. The officers begin clearing the building methodically. One officer takes one side while the other covers the opposite direction. They move through the shop, checking behind objects and around shelves. Clear. Then they come across Richard's shower, and something about it immediately catches the deputy's attention. The shower appears to have been recently used. That detail is strange. If someone had just showered there, it raises the possibility that a person involved in what happened to Richard may have been inside the shop only minutes earlier. Could someone have been cleaning themselves? Could evidence have been washed away? Or was the recently used shower completely unrelated? At this stage, investigators can't say for certain. They continue searching the building, but surprisingly, they find no obvious signs of a struggle. Nothing clearly indicates that Richard was attacked inside the shop. No immediate evidence reveals where the murder actually took place. So officers begin shifting their focus. Richard's house needs to be searched. A search warrant will be needed. And what investigators eventually uncover there could dramatically change the direction of the case. Outside, officers are still trying to regain control of the increasingly chaotic crime scene. Then another crucial person arrives, Cassie, the same woman who had earlier approached Sergeant Rodriguez and demanded that he arrest her own son, Isaiah. Her earlier statement now looks far more suspicious. Why was Cassie so eager to blame Isaiah before Richard's body had even been discovered? Did she know Richard was already dead? Had someone told her something? Or was there another reason she wanted investigators to focus on Isaiah immediately? Detectives now have a growing list of questions. Richard is dead. His body has been buried in a shallow grave outside his own shop. The grass above the grave appears to have been carefully replaced and watered in an apparent attempt to conceal the burial. Burnt debris is scattered across the property. A shower inside the shop appears to have been recently used. And before anyone had even discovered Richard's body, his own mother was demanding that police arrest Isaiah. At the same time, several other family members are also quickly pointing the finger at him. But investigators aren't ready to accept the family's accusations as fact. Because sometimes in a murder investigation, the loudest accusations can also be the most important clues. And as detectives begin digging deeper into Richard's death, they realize that this family may know far more about what happened than anyone is willing to admit. The discovery of Richard's body has answered one question. He is no longer missing, but it has created far more disturbing ones. Who killed 75-year-old Richard Andrews? Who buried him in the front yard of his own shop? Who tried to hide the grave by replacing and watering the grass? What was burned at the scene? Why did someone appear to have recently used the shower? And perhaps most importantly, why was Cassie so desperate to have her own son arrested before investigators even knew that a murder had taken place? In the next stage of the investigation, detectives will begin separating fact from accusation, and what they uncover will reveal whether Isaiah was truly the killer his family believed him to be, or whether the truth had been hiding much closer to home. But before investigators can move forward with the search for answers, they have to break the devastating news to Cassie. She wants to see for herself. She has already heard enough to know something terrible has happened, but standing outside the police line, she still seems unable to fully accept it. No, we can't. I just need to see. Officers immediately stop her. The area is now an active crime scene, and Richard's body is still lying in the shallow grave where it was discovered. Cassie begs again. Please, let me see. But the officers refuse to let her cross the line. No, you can't go. Listen, you can't. She insists that she only wants to look. I just gotta see. Anthony steps in, trying to reassure the officers that she won't interfere with the investigation. He promises she won't cross the police tape and only wants to look from a distance. But even from where she stands, the reality is becoming impossible to escape. Cassie looks toward the entrance of the shop and the area around the grave. Then she sees enough. The person they found buried there is her father. Naturally, Cassie is devastated, but her grief is complicated by something even more disturbing. Before Richard's body was discovered, Cassie had already told Sergeant Rodriguez to arrest her son Isaiah. Now that Richard has been found murdered and buried in a shallow grave, her earlier accusation takes on an entirely different meaning. Cassie isn't just mourning the death of her father. She appears to believe that her own son may have killed him. For now, officers continue securing the property while preparing to have Richard's body removed and sent for an autopsy. The autopsy may finally reveal how Richard died, but before that happens, another problem begins developing right in front of the officers. Family members are talking among themselves, frantically, emotionally, and investigators begin overhearing parts of the conversation. Do not start talking, please. Don't say anything. Just be quiet, please. Those statements immediately raise concern. Someone appears to know more than they're saying, and then the officers hear something even more alarming. Anthony is on his way back to the house. By now, Anthony has seen the horrifying discovery for himself. His father-in-law has been found buried in the ground, and like several other members of the family, Anthony has become convinced that Isaiah is responsible. But Anthony isn't calmly waiting for detectives to finish their investigation. He's furious, and he's already heading toward the house where Isaiah is located. To the officers at the crime scene, this creates an urgent and potentially dangerous situation. We need units down at 430 Dale. Additional officers are immediately requested. Then comes the warning. Anthony is heading to the house, and the possible suspect is there. What happens when a furious father who believes his son has murdered a family member comes face to face with him? No one knows. Anthony has just witnessed one of the most horrifying things imaginable. The body of his father-in-law buried in a shallow grave. He's angry, he's emotional, and he wants answers from Isaiah. So officers race to the house. Multiple units are dispatched, hoping to arrive before Anthony can confront his son. Minutes later, police pull up to the property. They make it just in time. Only seconds after the officers arrive, Anthony appears behind them. And he's not alone. Other family members have also arrived. Everyone wants to know the same thing. Did Isaiah kill Richard? Officers immediately begin pushing the family back. Stay back. Go back now. I need you guys to stay back, okay? Please. The situation is extremely tense. Police quickly move Isaiah away from the approaching family members. They need to separate him from Anthony before emotions turn into violence. An officer orders Isaiah to be secured inside a patrol car. Just secure him in your car. Another officer is instructed to frisk him for weapons, but Anthony is already demanding answers. Did you do it? Officers repeatedly tell him to stay back. Please stay back, sir. But Anthony can't control his emotions. Did you do it? He stares directly at Isaiah. Look at me. Did you do it? Again, officers try to keep him away. Please, I need you to stay back, sir. But Anthony continues. Did you do it, Isaiah? Look at me. Then he says something that makes the confrontation even more heartbreaking. Yeah, you're my firstborn. Did you do it? His own father is begging him for an answer, but Isaiah doesn't give him one. Instead, he says something completely different. You're my lawyer. That statement immediately adds another layer of confusion to an already chaotic situation. Officers move Isaiah inside the patrol vehicle and close the door. But despite what the family believes, there's an important detail that isn't immediately obvious. Isaiah hasn't been arrested because police have proved that he killed Richard. In fact, investigators still don't have enough evidence to establish that. One officer asks whether Isaiah is actually a suspect. The response is revealing. The only reason he's in custody right now? They think he did it. Another officer clarifies that police don't yet have probable cause or reasonable evidence to formally conclude that Isaiah is responsible. For the moment, the main priority is keeping everyone separated. We need to keep them separated. Isaiah is taken away from the family because emotions are dangerously high. The officers can't allow Anthony or anyone else to confront him while the murder investigation is still in its earliest stages. But from the family's perspective, things look very different. They watch as Isaiah is placed in the patrol vehicle, and to them it appears that justice is already happening. For the second time that day, Isaiah is being accused of something. Only now the accusation is far more serious. Richard isn't simply missing anymore. He's dead. He's been buried in a shallow grave. And Isaiah's own family appears convinced that he is responsible. They stand nearby watching as he is taken into custody, seemingly believing that the case has been solved. But investigators aren't ready to make that conclusion. Because despite all the accusations, the evidence still needs to tell the story. And what officers are about to uncover will complicate everything. The deeper investigators look into Richard's death, the more they begin to realize that Isaiah isn't the only person they need to examine. In fact, The behavior of several family members has already raised serious questions. Cassie wanted Isaiah arrested before Richard's body was even discovered. Other relatives immediately began blaming him without presenting direct evidence. And at the crime scene, someone was telling others to stay quiet. Don't say anything. Just be quiet, please. As detectives begin putting these details together, one thing becomes increasingly clear. No one in this family can simply be trusted at their word. Everyone has a story. Everyone has an opinion about what happened. And several people appear to know far more than they initially admitted. Isaiah may be responsible, but he may also be the person the family is too quickly blaming, while the real truth remains hidden somewhere else. After the initial chaos, Isaiah is transported to the Grant County Jail. Police now have enough suspicion to continue investigating him, but the case is far from over. Meanwhile, officers remain focused on the rest of Richard's family. They need to reconstruct Richard's final hours. They need to determine when he disappeared. They need to find out how his body ended up buried outside his own shop. And they need to know who had access to the property. But by now, Richard's daughters are too shaken to speak in detail. The discovery of their father's body has left them emotionally overwhelmed. So investigators turn their attention to someone else, Richard's son-in-law, Greg. Greg is particularly important because he was one of the first family members involved in the discovery at the shop. And as detectives begin speaking with him, they're about to learn something that could become a crucial piece of the investigation. Greg has information that may help investigators understand what happened before Richard was reported missing, information that could explain the strange behavior of the family, and information that could begin revealing how this carefully concealed murder was carried out. Because Richard's killer didn't simply leave his body behind. Someone buried him. Someone attempted to cover the grave by replacing the grass. Someone apparently watered the area to make it look untouched. And burnt debris was left scattered around the property, suggesting that someone may have tried to destroy evidence. This was not a random act followed by panic. At least some part of what happened appears to have involved a deliberate effort to cover up the crime. The question now is whether Isaiah was the person responsible for that cover-up, or whether someone else was helping to create the perfect story and direct investigators toward him. As detectives sit down with Greg, the case is about to enter a completely new phase. The accusations have already begun, the body has been found, and Isaiah has been taken away. But now, for the first time, investigators may finally begin getting the information they need to understand what really happened to 75-year-old Richard Andrews. And Greg's account could be the first step toward exposing the truth behind this horrifying family murder. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more gripping true crime stories.